Life Audio.
Welcome to the Crosswalk Devotional. We're glad to have you listening with us. Today's topic is about processing times when God doesn't seem to do what we believe He would. We'll return with the devotional after a brief message from our sponsor. When God Doesn't Answer Our Prayers as We Expected, written and read by Jennifer Slattery. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sister sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." John chapter 11, verses 1 through 4. Have you ever felt certain God assured you that He'd answer a prayer, present you with a specific opportunity, or work in a relationship in a particular way, only to find your hopes dashed? Those situations can cause us to doubt God's faithfulness or our ability to hear Him. It can also trigger anger, as it did with a recent guest on the Faith Over Fear podcast. While grieving years of infertility, she read a passage in Scripture where God promised to bring beauty and abundance to desert wastelands. Through this, she believed the Lord would give her a child. When that didn't occur, she initially became upset with God, but then He drew her back to that passage and helped her understand His intended message specifically for her. I thought of her experience as I read Jesus' words in John chapter 11, verse 4, and the events that followed. When Mary and Martha sent word of their brother's illness, He responded quite clearly that Lazarus would not die. That likely brought them such encouragement as they waited and waited and waited for Jesus, the healer, to come. They probably clung to the hope the Lord spoke into their souls right to the end, up to their brother's final breath. How their hearts must have shattered in that moment. What anguished questions flooded their minds as they washed His body with ointment, wrapped it with cloth, and placed it in the tomb. Notice what we read in verse 20. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet Him, but Mary stayed at home. This strikes me as uncharacteristic when I consider Mary's behavior previously when she and her sister hosted Jesus and His disciples for a meal. Then she defied the social rules of her day and Martha's expectations to sit listening at the Lord's feet. But now, when the one upon whom she'd placed her hope arrives, she remains home until she learns that He asked for her. Then she quickly goes to Him and says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." In other words, where were you? Based on the fact that Martha said the exact same thing in verse 21, I wonder if perhaps multiple people made this statement as they awaited Jesus' arrival. Notice also how some of the Jews who came to comfort the sisters reacted when the Lord approached Lazarus' tomb. They said, "Could not He who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" I doubt this was the first time they said this. They couldn't understand why Jesus hadn't rushed to help Lazarus. Some of them decided this meant that He didn't care. Perhaps there's a part of you that feels the same. Maybe your circumstances feel so dire, so final, you've stopped asking God for help. I suspect Mary had as well. This is why this biblical account in John chapter 11 is so beautiful and inspiring. Arriving at Lazarus' tomb, Jesus commanded the people to roll away the stone and, quote, called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." Verse 44 states, "The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, 'Take off the grave clothes and let him go.'" Intersecting life and faith. I'm struck by how Jesus responded to Martha and Mary's statement, which reads like an accusation. "Lord, if you had been here, our brother wouldn't have died." Jesus didn't chastise the sisters for their questions, doubts, and inner wrestling. He didn't rebuke them for their lack of faith, nor did he downplay their grief. Instead, he showed them his glory and brought life to that which was dead. This demonstrates that no situation is beyond God's resurrecting power. But that's not its only message. This biblical account also suggests how we should respond when something we believe God promised doesn't seem to come to pass. It's okay to feel angry and to wrestle with God, as I'm sure Mary did in between his promise in verse 4 and Lazarus walking out of his grave. But may we take our doubts and intense emotions to the only one who can bring clarity to our confusion and rekindled hope to our hurting souls.
The Crosswalk Devotional is a production of Life Audio and Salem Media. If you liked what you heard today, please take a second to rate and review this podcast in your favorite podcast app so that more listeners like you can find the show. For more faith-filled, inspirational podcasts, visit us at lifeaudio.com.
Hi, I'm Beckett Cook, host of The Beckett Cook Show. I lived as a gay man in Hollywood for many, many years until I had a radical encounter with Jesus 13 years ago. Since then, I've gotten my master's degree in seminary and published a book called A Change of Affection. On my podcast, The Beckett Cook Show, I sit down with fascinating Christian scholars and thinkers to address the lies of the culture and bring the biblical truth to bear on those lies. To start listening now, go to lifeaudio.com or search for The Beckett Cook Show on your favorite podcasting platform.